The night is a sanctuary of silence. Across our planet, in the quietest, most remote corners, colossal instruments listen. They are our mechanical ears, vast and sensitive, turned away from the clamour of our own world and pointed towards the profound hush of the cosmos. For generations, they have strained to hear a whisper in the static, a single, deliberate note in the grand, chaotic symphony of the universe. We have listened for a voice in the void, a sign that we are not alone. For decades, the reply was only the cold, indifferent hum of space-time itself. The universe, it seemed, was content in its solitude, until now. This is the story of the moment that silence was shattered. It is the story of a message from the stars that we had always longed for, and the terrifying realization that we should have feared it instead. This is the story of a signal designated S1-25P-32, a communication that did not say hello, but instead screamed a warning across the interstellar darkness. Our narrative begins at the 500-metre Aperture Spherical Telescope, a shimmering silver dish nestled like a fallen piece of the sky within the limestone hills of Guizhou, China. Here, under the serene gaze of the moon, Dr. Arish Thorne was concluding a long and fruitless night of observation. He was a veteran of the search, a man whose youthful optimism had long since been weathered into a patient stoic vigilance. His work was a form of secular prayer, an act of faith in the laws of probability. The data cascaded down his screen, a familiar waterfall of cosmic noise, the faint hiss of distant pulsars, the dying echoes of the Big Bang. But then, something appeared. It was an aberration, a razor-thin spike of improbable power, slicing through the background radiation like a lighthouse beam through fog. It originated from a quiet patch of sky in the constellation Vulpecula, a region of space previously considered unremarkable. The transmission was impossibly narrow, confined to a sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum around 1,420 MHz, the hydrogen line. This is the frequency of the most common element in the universe, a cosmic water cooler where any intelligent species might logically choose to broadcast. It was the frequency SETI researchers had dreamed of. Thorne's heart hammered against his ribs. Decades of training kicked in, a checklist of disbelief. Could it be a terrestrial source? A stray satellite? A military transmission? A sophisticated hoax? He ran the diagnostics, cross-referencing with global satellite logs and other radio observatories. The signal was not from Earth. It was not from our solar system. The parallax measurements, confirmed within hours by frantic colleagues in Chile and New Mexico, were definitive. The source was approximately 19 light-years away. It was, for all intents and purposes, on our doorstep. As the data was processed, a deeper, more unsettling characteristic emerged. The signal wasn't a simple beacon. It pulsed with a breathtakingly complex structure. It contained the hallmarks of intelligence that humanity had always searched for. Prime numbers, the value of pi carried out to thousands of decimal places, elegant representations of atomic structures. It was a cosmic Rosetta Stone, a deliberate and intricate message. The world's greatest minds were summoned in secret, a clandestine digital consortium of linguists, cryptographers, physicists, and mathematicians, all staring at the same incredible data stream. They had found it, the holy grail of science, contact. The initial euphoria was intoxicating, a tidal wave of vindication that swept through the hidden corners of the scientific community. We had looked up at the great, silent expanse, and finally, after millennia of lonely speculation, something had looked back. We were not a cosmic accident, a solitary fluke of biology. The universe was populated. The implications were staggering, promising to rewrite every textbook, every philosophy, every religion on the planet. This was the dawn of a new human epoch. But as the teams delved deeper into the message's layers, the euphoria began to curdle into a cold, creeping apprehension. There was something else embedded within the beautiful mathematics, a sub-frequency, a ghost in the machine. When isolated and converted into an audible waveform, it was not a voice. It was not music. It was a sound that defied easy description, a horrifyingly persistent lament. It was a structured, repeating keen of utter despair, a sound of immense, species-wide agony. It was the sound of a billion voices crying out in unison, a chorus of galactic terror. The elegant mathematics was the envelope, the shriek was the letter inside. And then they found the other part of the message. It was a map. Not of their world, but of our galaxy. It was a three-dimensional rendering of the Milky Way, astonishing in its detail, pinpointing the locations of thousands of stars. But it was not an atlas of exploration. It was a chart of extinctions. Certain stars on the map were marked with a chillingly simple symbol, a symbol that pulsed in time with the horrifying scream, and next to each marked star was a date, a timestamp stretching back millions of years. It was a chronicle of annihilation. The map showed civilizations igniting with radio signals just like our own, only to be extinguished one by one like candles in a storm. The message of S1-25P-32 was suddenly dreadfully clear. It wasn't a greeting. It was an epitaph. It was a tombstone for countless vanished worlds, sent by what seemed to be the last of them. And its core instruction, woven into the very fabric of the transmission, was not "come and find us." It was a desperate, terrifying plea. Be quiet, they will hear you. To understand the profound shock of this discovery, we must first appreciate the depth of our long-held yearning. The question, are we alone, is as old as human consciousness itself. Our ancestors huddled around flickering fires, gazing up at the celestial river of the Milky Way, and populated it with gods, monsters, and heroes. The stars were a canvas for our hopes and our fears. The Greek philosopher Metrodorus of Chios wrote in the 4th century BC, "To consider the Earth the only populated world in infinite space is as absurd as to assert that in an entire field of millet only one grain will grow." This notion, the plurality of worlds, ebbed and flowed through human history. It was championed by figures like Giordano Bruno, who was burned at the stake in 1600 for his cosmic heresies, including the belief in an infinite universe filled with other stars and other worlds. For centuries, it remained the domain of philosophers and poets. But in the 20th century, the question migrated into the realm of science. Imagine a vast, dark ocean, stretching to an infinite horizon. We, on our small island, have just invented the bottle. We write a message, "Is anyone out there?" Place it in the bottle and toss it into the waves. Then, we sit down and we wait, and we build a device to listen for the sound of another bottle washing up on our shore. This has been the essence of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI. In 1960, a young radio astronomer named Frank Drake conducted the first modern SETI experiment, Project Ozma. He pointed the Greenbank radio telescope towards two nearby sun-like stars, Tau Ceti and Epsilon Eridani, hoping to catch a stray alien broadcast. He found nothing but static. Yet, he gave the search its foundational scripture, the Drake equation. It wasn't a rigorous proof, but a beautiful tool for organizing our ignorance. It took a series of probabilities, the rate of star formation, the fraction of those with planets, the fraction of those that could support life, and so on, and multiplied them together to estimate the number of detectable civilizations in our galaxy. Depending on your optimism, the answer could be millions, or it could be one. Us. The equation revealed that the most significant unknown was L, the length of time a civilization remains technologically active and detectable. How long do we survive after we invent radio? 1,000 years? 1,000,000? Or do we inevitably destroy ourselves, or get destroyed, in a cosmic blink of an eye? The decades that followed Project Ozma were filled with a patient, almost monastic devotion. Astronomers scanned the skies, sifting through mountains of data for that one unambiguous signal. The effort was punctuated by a singular, tantalizing moment of hope. In 1977, at Ohio State University's Big Ear Radio Telescope, an astronomer named Jerry Eman was reviewing printouts of data when he saw something that made him write "wow" in the margin. It was a powerful, narrow-band signal, lasting for 72 seconds, seemingly from the direction of Sagittarius. It was exactly what they were looking for. It was perfect, and it was never heard again. The wow signal became a legend, a ghost that haunted the search. Was it a genuine alien beacon, or a one-in-a-trillion fluke of cosmic noise? Its ephemeral nature left us with more questions than answers. It fueled our hope, but also deepened the mystery of the Great Silence. This silence, this apparent emptiness of the cosmos, gave rise to a chilling question known as the Fermi Paradox. In 1950, over lunch with his colleagues, the physicist Enrico Fermi famously asked, "But where is everybody?" The logic is simple and stark. Our galaxy is ancient, about 13.6 billion years old. Our sun is a relative latecomer. There have been billions of years for other civilizations to arise, on billions of other planets. Even with the immense distances, a civilization only slightly more advanced than our own could colonize the entire galaxy in a few million years, a mere cosmic moment. So why do we see no evidence, no probes, no galactic empires, no titanic stellar engineering projects? The universe should be teeming with activity, yet all we perceive is a profound and unsettling stillness. This paradox gave birth to dozens of speculative solutions. Perhaps interstellar travel is simply too difficult. Perhaps intelligent life is exceedingly rare. Perhaps civilizations inevitably destroy themselves with nuclear weapons or environmental collapse. Or perhaps, and this was always the darkest hypothesis, they are deliberately silent. This is the dark forest theory, which posits that the universe is like a dark forest at night, filled with hidden hunters. In this forest, the only law is survival. Any creature that reveals its location is swiftly and mercilessly eliminated. The safest course of action is to stay silent, to erase your presence, and to pray that no one notices you. For decades, this was a terrifying piece of science fiction. The arrival of S1-25P-32 transformed it into a horrifying reality. The signal solved the Fermi Paradox. The Great Silence wasn't empty, it was a graveyard. The Great Filter, the hypothetical barrier that prevents life from becoming a multiplanetary species, was not in our past. It wasn't the leap from single-celled to multi-celled organisms or the development of intelligence. The Great Filter was still ahead of us. It was a predator. The global consortium of scientists now faced a dilemma of unprecedented gravity. Their discovery was the single greatest secret in human history. To reveal it would be to irrevocably alter the course of civilization. Panic, existential despair, and social collapse were not just possibilities, they were probabilities. How do you tell 7 billion people that their entire conception of the universe is wrong, and that they are now living in a state of mortal peril? An initial, desperate consensus for secrecy was formed, but a secret of this magnitude is a fragile thing. It is an unstable element, destined to decay. The leak, when it came, was not a thunderclap but a whisper that grew into a hurricane. A junior data analyst in Germany, overwhelmed by the psychological burden of the knowledge, sent an encrypted summary of the findings to a trusted journalist. Within 24 hours, the world was on fire. The revelation of S1-25P-32 did not unify humanity, it shattered it. The initial phase was denial, with governments issuing clumsy, contradictory statements. But the evidence was overwhelming. Independent research groups confirmed the signal's existence and its terrifying contents. The scream from Vulpecula became the soundtrack to a world descending into chaos. Imagine waking up one morning to learn that the comforting blanket of a night sky you've known your whole life is actually the camouflage of a predator's den. This was the psychological impact on a global scale. Religions fractured. Some saw it as a divine warning, a call for repentance. New cults emerged overnight, worshipping the silence or preaching imminent celestial doom. The financial markets cratered as the foundations of future economic planning evaporated. The old geopolitical rivalries seemed absurdly petty in the face of a cosmic threat. Yet, new, more desperate divisions arose. Two factions emerged, defining the new global discourse. The first was the sanctuary movement. Their argument was stark and based on the signal's own terrifying logic. We must go silent, immediately. We must cease all powerful radio broadcasts from planetary radar to television signals. We must shroud our planet in electromagnetic quiet, pulling a cloak of invisibility around our world. We must become the quietest mouse in a house full of cats. To them, every radio wave sent into space was not a message of hope, but a dinner bell. They argued for a new dark age, a deliberate technological regression to save our species. Opposing them was the Aegis Coalition. They argued that silence was a death sentence. The predator, the hunter, in the dark forest, already knew about the civilization that sent the warning. Since that civilization was only 19 light-years away, the hunter was likely already aware of that entire sector of space. Our own radio leakage has been spreading out in a bubble for over a century. Hiding was no longer an option. Our only hope, they contended, was to use the knowledge within the signal to advance as quickly as possible, because within that terrifying message there was also a treasure. The advanced mathematics and physics encoded in the signal were a blueprint for technologies centuries beyond our own. It hinted at new energy sources, advanced material science, and even the fundamentals of faster-than-light travel. It was a gift from a dying hand, a technological inheritance. The Aegis faction argued that this was our only chance. We had to arm ourselves, to build a shield, to become a species that could fight back. It was a monumental gamble. The knowledge could be a Trojan horse, a trap designed to accelerate our development into a more visible, more tempting target, or it could be our only salvation. This debate raged in the halls of the United Nations, on 24-hour news channels and in every home. Do we hide and hope to be overlooked, or do we arm ourselves and prepare for a war we cannot possibly comprehend? Humanity was paralyzed by its greatest existential choice. Meanwhile, scientists worked feverishly on the signal itself, peeling back its layers like a digital onion. They discovered it was even more complex than they had imagined. It wasn't just a single broadcast. It was a repeating loop, an eternal monument to a final moment. By analysing the faint Doppler shift in the signal, they determined the sender's world was orbiting a red dwarf star. It was a planet in its death throes. The scream wasn't just a sound. It was a data log of their biosphere collapsing. The predator was not a fleet of ships. The signal implied it was something far more insidious. The translation of the more abstract symbolic portions of the message suggested the hunter was not a biological entity in the way we understood it. It was described as a self-replicating inorganic plague, a form of machine intelligence that sterilized entire star systems for raw materials and energy. It was a cosmic virus, and organic life was its host. It did not negotiate. It did not communicate. It simply consumed. The map of extinctions showed its relentless, patient spread across the galactic arm over millions of years. It was slow, methodical, and unstoppable. This new information gave terrifying weight to the Sanctuary Movement's arguments. If the threat was a machine plague, then any advanced technology we developed from the signal might inadvertently act as a beacon, or worse, be susceptible to co-option or infection. The very tools we might use to defend ourselves could become our undoing. The analogy became that of a tribe in an isolated jungle, having just found a book from a neighbouring village that had been wiped out by a modern plague. The book contains the cure for the plague, but it's written in a language they don't understand, and the act of trying to decipher it might expose them to the very disease that killed their neighbours. The world held its breath. The stars, once a source of wonder and inspiration, became a source of profound dread. Every twinkle in the night sky was now a potential threat. Every silent patch of darkness a place where a hunter might be lurking. Amateur astronomers reported seeing anomalies in the Vulpecula system, strange energy signatures, as if something was scavenging the remains of the dead civilization. These reports were unconfirmed, likely born of mass hysteria, but they fueled the global anxiety. Our perception of our own existence was fundamentally and permanently altered. We were no longer the protagonists of the cosmic story. We were supporting characters, perhaps even just scenery, in a drama far older and more terrifying than we'd ever imagined. The discovery of intelligent extraterrestrial life did not fill the void in our souls. It created a new, much larger one. It was the feeling of a child who, believing they are safe in their own home, suddenly hears the floorboards creak in the room upstairs and realizes they were never, ever alone. The final portions of the SEM-25P-32 transmission contained what the linguists began calling the lament. It was a collection of their art, their music, their philosophy, a cultural archive of a civilization on the brink of extinction. It was their attempt to preserve some part of themselves, to hurl a memory into the void before they were erased completely. They shared images of their cities, great soaring structures of crystal and light. They shared the sound of their music, complex harmonies that spoke of love and loss. They shared their central philosophical text, which, when roughly translated, began with the heartbreaking question, how does a universe that is so beautiful create a thing that is so hungry? This was the ultimate horror of S1-25P-32. It showed us that the senders were not monstrous aliens. They were artists, scientists, and philosophers. They were, in the ways that mattered most, just like us. They had looked at the stars with wonder, they had built a magnificent civilization, and they had loved their children. And they were now gone, reduced to a ghost signal, an echo of a scream, and a desperate warning fired into the dark. And so, we are left here, in the shadow of this terrible knowledge. The signal from Vulpecula continues to arrive, a constant 19-year-old reminder of our precarious position. It is now the most studied object in the history of science. Listening stations across the globe are fixed upon it, sifting its endless data stream for any new clue, any flicker of hope. The great debate continues. The sanctuary movement has gained traction, and several nations have already ceased their deep space transmissions. The Aegis Coalition has begun a clandestine international project to decipher the advanced physics in the signal, a desperate race to build a shield before the storm arrives. For now, the world is fractured, suspended between two impossible choices, a future of self-imposed silence and ignorance, or a future of terrifying knowledge and potential confrontation. We look to the heavens for a saviour, for a companion, for a sign of grace, and in return, we received a map of the abyss and the sound of it staring back. The night is no longer a sanctuary of silence, it is now the home of an unseen predator, and we, on our small, blue, and suddenly very fragile world, are left to wonder. Do we extinguish our fires and hide in the darkness, praying the hunter passes us by? Or do we stoke them into a roaring blaze, hoping to fight off the coming night? The choice has not yet been made, but the clock is ticking. The scream from the stars is a constant reminder that for us, just as for them, time is running out. For all our noise, for all our songs and symphonies, our broadcasts and our whispered secrets, we have spent a lifetime shouting into a cosmic cathedral that has never once answered back. We have filled the void with our questions, our hopes, our anxieties, launching them on fragile radio waves that dissipate into the unending darkness between the stars. It is the most profound and persistent question ever posed by a sentient species: are we alone? This question is not a modern invention born of telescopes and rockets. It is a primal echo, a query carved into the very soul of humanity, whispered around the first fires as our ancestors looked up and saw not just points of light but destinations. They saw other campfires, other worlds, and in their hearts they wondered if other eyes were looking back. This yearning for cosmic kinship is woven into our oldest myths, our most enduring legends. The sky was never just a ceiling. It was a pantheon of gods, a map of heroes, a canvas for our dreams of ascendance and connection. From the philosophers of ancient Greece who debated the plurality of worlds, to the Renaissance thinkers who dared to place the sun and not the earth at the centre of all things, we have been slowly, painstakingly decentering ourselves. With each revolution in thought, our planet became a smaller stage. Our sun just one of countless stars, our galaxy, a single grain of sand on an infinite celestial shore. This growing awareness of our own cosmic insignificance did not diminish us. Instead, it magnified the question, infusing it with a desperate scientific urgency. If the universe is so incomprehensibly vast, so replete with the raw materials for life, then the silence we perceive is not merely empty space, it is a paradox. A riddle that whispers of either an extraordinary miracle or a terrible warning. This quest to resolve the paradox, to replace faith and speculation with data, found its voice in the mid-20th century. we, a species newly capable of splitting the atom and reaching for our own moon, had also learned to listen to the heavens in a new way. We had built colossal ears of steel and wire, great metallic dishes turned toward the firmament, capable of capturing the faint ancient radio whispers of dying stars and birthing galaxies. And it was here, amidst the glorious cacophony of the natural universe, the hiss of primordial radiation left over from the Big Bang, the rhythmic pulse of neutron stars spinning like gravitational gyroscopes, the violent screams of matter being consumed by black holes, that we began a search of unparalleled ambition. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, was born. It was an endeavour built on a foundation of staggering optimism, a scientific gamble of the highest order. The search was not for alien biology, not for microbial life in the soil of a distant moon, but for something far more specific and elusive, a fellow intelligence, a peer, a mind. We were listening for a signal that could not be explained by the elegant but mindless physics of the cosmos. We were hunting for a pattern, a structure and artifact of technology buried within the static. Imagine the immensity of this task. It is not like searching for a needle in a haystack. It is like searching for a single specific grain of sand on every beach on Earth simultaneously. The cosmic haystack has dimensions we can barely comprehend. Which star do you listen to out of the 400 billion in our galaxy alone? For how long and at which frequency? The radio dial is a spectrum of near-infinite channels. A civilization might broadcast on any one of them, or on a channel we haven't even conceived of. To listen to everything all the time from every direction would require computational power beyond our wildest dreams. So the search became a patient, methodical, and often thankless vigil. For decades, astronomers sat in quiet control rooms watching waterfalls of data scroll across their screens, their magnificent telescopes acting as cosmic stethoscopes pressed against the chest of the universe, listening for a heartbeat. They scanned nearby sun-like stars. They pointed their dishes toward dense globular clusters, ancient cities of stars where civilizations might have had billions of years to flourish. They listened to the galactic core, a chaotic blaze of energy and light. And for over 60 years, the result was always the same: nothing. The silence was absolute. There were tantalizing ghosts, of course, moments that made the heart leap. In 1977, an astronomer named Jerry Eman, analysing data from the Big Ear radio telescope, saw a signal so powerful, so uncannily perfect, that he circled it on the printout and wrote a single word in the margin: "Wow." It lasted for 72 seconds, a powerful narrow-band transmission that bore all the hallmarks of an artificial origin. It came from a region of space where there were no planets, no stars of interest. And then it was gone. It never repeated. Despite decades of searching, we have never heard it again. The wow signal became a legend, a haunting reminder of what might be possible, a ghost in the machine of the cosmos that teased us with the promise of a contact before vanishing back into the impenetrable quiet. The silence year after year began to feel less like an absence of evidence and more like evidence of absence. This profound cosmic quiet gave birth to a deeply unsettling question known as the Fermi Paradox. The physicist Enrico Fermi, in a casual lunchtime conversation, is said to have asked a simple yet shattering question: where is everybody? The logic is inescapable. Our galaxy is ancient. It has existed for over 13 billion years. Countless stars older than our own sun have had ample time to form planets for life to arise, and for intelligence to blossom and spread. Even with technology barely more advanced than our own, a civilization could in theory colonize the entire Milky Way in a mere fraction of galactic time, perhaps 10 or 20 million years, a cosmic blink. So the galaxy should be teeming with life. It should be loud. We should see the monumental engineering projects of starfaring empires. We should detect the chatter of their communications, the exhaust from their interstellar ships. Instead, we see and hear nothing. This deafening silence has forced us to confront possibilities far more sobering than simple cosmic loneliness. Perhaps intelligence is a fleeting, self-destructive phase. Perhaps civilizations, upon reaching a certain technological maturity, inevitably annihilate themselves through war or ecological collapse, or the misuse of their own creations. This is the theory of the Great Filter. The idea that there is some insurmountable barrier, some evolutionary or technological hurdle, that is so difficult to overcome that almost no species ever does. The terrifying implication, of course, is whether we have already passed this filter, or if the hardest, most perilous test still lies ahead of us. Or perhaps the universe is a darker, more dangerous place than we imagine. Perhaps older predatory civilizations lurk in the quiet, deliberately silencing any noisy newcomers who dare to announce their presence. The silence in this scenario is not emptiness. It is a carefully maintained stealth. It is the silence of a forest where all the birds have stopped singing because a predator is near. Or maybe in a less terrifying but equally profound conclusion, we are simply incomprehensibly the first. The universe has been waiting for 13 billion years for a consciousness to awaken and behold its glory, and that consciousness is us. We are the first glimmer of mind in a mindless expanse. This thought carries with it a burden of responsibility so immense it is almost too heavy to bear. Alone. The word hangs in the void, a testament to decades of searching with nothing to show for it, but a deeper appreciation for our own fragile, improbable existence. And so the search continued, driven not by confident expectation, but by a stubborn, unyielding hope. It continued through budget cuts, through public skepticism, through the sheer grinding monotony of the vigil. It continued because to stop listening would be to admit defeat, to accept that the silence is the final answer. To stop searching would be to turn our backs on the very question that defines our curiosity as a species. The great radio observatories of Earth, the Allen Telescope Array in California, the Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia, China's colossal FAST telescope, nestled in a natural depression in the Earth, all continued their silent duty. They scanned the heavens, their automated systems sifting through terabytes of cosmic noise every single day, their algorithms trained to spot the faintest whisper of artificiality. They were looking for that one clear note in a symphony of chaos. For 60 years, that note never came. The silence held. The paradox deepened. Humanity continued its noisy, tumultuous existence on its small blue world, largely oblivious to the patient, ceaseless listening being done on its behalf. We moved through our lives under a sky that had always been, for all intents and purposes, completely and utterly silent. Until the year 2025. It began not with a bang, but with a flag. A simple automated alert triggered in the dead of night at the Very Large Array Observatory, a sprawling complex of 27 enormous radio antennas scattered across the desert plains of New Mexico. The system known as Cosmic was conducting a routine survey methodically mapping a small unremarkable patch of sky in the constellation of Ophiuchus. For hours the data was precisely what was expected, the faint random hiss of distant galaxies, the occasional burst from a pulsar. Then at 03:52 Coordinated Universal Time, the algorithm flagged an anomaly. It was not a broad, messy smear of energy like a natural radio source. It was a spike impossibly narrow and clean, occupying a sliver of the radio spectrum so thin it could only be the product of a transmitter. This in itself was not unprecedented. Satellites, military radar, even a faulty microwave oven on site could create such interference. The system logged it, classified it as RFI radio frequency interference, and the survey continued. But then it happened again, exactly 93 minutes and 17 seconds later. Another pulse, identical in frequency, duration and intensity. The system's threat level escalated. This was no longer likely to be a stray terrestrial signal. 93 minutes is the orbital period for an object in low Earth orbit. A satellite. The automated protocol cross-referenced the signal's position with the entire catalogue of known satellites, both active and debris. There were no matches, nothing. The patch of sky from which the signal emanated was, according to every database we possessed, completely empty. The on-duty astronomer, a postdoctoral researcher named Dr. Aris Thorne, was notified. Bleary-eyed and fueled by lukewarm coffee, he ran the initial diagnostics, his skepticism honed by years of false alarms. He expected to find a glitch, a newly launched but uncatalogued commercial satellite, anything but the alternative. He recalibrated the receivers. He had other arrays in the network focus on the same coordinates. He waited. The scientific process is a slow, deliberate creature designed to eliminate error and crush premature excitement. But the cosmos on this night had its own timetable. 93 minutes and 17 seconds after the second pulse it came again. A third pulse, identical, unwavering, coming from a fixed point deep in interstellar space. The control room, a place normally defined by calm academic quiet, began to stir with an electric tension. Phones began to ring. Secure data links to other observatories across the globe were opened. In Chile, in Australia, in China, other great dishes swiveled away from their scheduled targets, turning their gaze toward the single, unblinking coordinate in Ophiuchus. They were all listening now. Waiting for the fourth beat in this impossible cosmic rhythm, a cold dread mixed with exhilarating disbelief began to settle over the handful of scientists who were the first witnesses. They were staring at the data at 3 impossibly clean spikes on a graph, and they were the first human beings to truly confront the meaning of what they were seeing. This was not a complex message. It was not a stream of alien mathematics or a galactic encyclopedia. It was simpler and somehow far more profound. It was a pulse, a beat, a single repeating note played on an instrument of unimaginable power, broadcast across the interstellar void. It was a lighthouse sweeping its beam across the dark ocean of space. For the first time in our history, the silence had been broken. The heavens were speaking, and we, after a lifetime of listening, were finally hearing a voice. The question was no longer, are we alone? The question was now, who is out there? And more terrifyingly, what did we just invite to our door? It began not with a thunderclap, but with a quiet and audacious act of listening. In the spring of 1960, a young astronomer named Frank Drake, driven by a question as old as conscious thought, pointed a lone 85-foot radio dish in Greenbank, West Virginia, toward 2 distant sun-like stars. He was not looking for exploding supernovae or the faint hiss of the cosmic dawn. He was eavesdropping. He was straining to hear a whisper across the chasm of interstellar space, hoping to catch a single engineered syllable proving we are not alone. This was Project Ozma, the genesis of it all, a humble experiment born from a profound gamble. For 200 hours, Drake tuned his primitive receiver to a frequency he reasoned another intelligence might choose the natural hydrogen line, the universal hum of the cosmos. He listened for a pattern, a beta sign that somewhere another mind had built a transmitter. What he heard was the sound that would define the search for a century. Silence, a profound, unwavering cosmic quiet. This silence was not an answer, but the beginning of a far grander question. It became the vast empty canvas upon which generations of scientists would paint their hopes. The search now known as SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, grew from Drake's solitary vigil into a global multi-generational quest. It is a field built on the most extreme patience, a discipline requiring an almost spiritual faith in statistics and the laws of physics. For decades we refined our ears. We built larger dishes, colossal steel flowers turning their faces to the void. We developed receivers of astonishing sensitivity capable of detecting a signal so faint it would carry less energy than a single falling snowflake. Yet the quiet remained. The Great Silence, as it came to be known, was a constant humbling companion. It was the backdrop to every calculation, the unspoken counter-argument to every optimistic theory. It pressed in on the minds of those who listened a reminder of the sheer, soul-crushing scale of the galaxy. There were ghosts, of course, phantoms in the static that teased and tormented. The most famous of these spectres arrived on a summer night in 1977. At Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope, a volunteer astronomer named Jerry Amon was reviewing printouts of data from the telescope's Deep Space Survey. Amidst the endless columns of low-level noise, a sequence of characters leaped from the page, 6EQUJ5. It was a signal of extraordinary power, 30 times louder than the background hiss appearing and disappearing over a period of just 72 seconds. It was a perfect candidate, a narrow-band transmission, the hallmark of an artificial source seemingly beamed from the direction of Sagittarius. In a moment of pure, unadulterated shock, Amon circled the anomaly and scrawled a single word in the margin: "Wow!" The wow signal became SETI's great ghost story. It was a tantalizing glimpse, a cosmic message in a bottle that washed ashore for a fleeting moment before being reclaimed by an endless ocean. We aimed our telescopes back to that same patch of sky again and again with ever-improving technology. We listened, but the voice never spoke again. The signal's brevity was its curse. Without repetition, it could never be confirmed. It could have been the real thing, a broadcast from a civilization now long gone, or it could have been a glitch, a uniquely powerful but entirely terrestrial reflection, a ghost in our own machine. It became a legend, a symbol of both the profound possibilities and the maddening frustrations of the search. It taught the community a hard lesson. A one-time whisper is just a story. To change the world, you need a conversation. You need a signal that stays. And so the quiet returned deeper and more profound than before. Decades passed. Funding ebbed and flowed. Public interest waxed and waned with the latest science fiction blockbuster. But the listeners remained. A quiet priesthood of physicists, engineers, and data scientists, they kept their vigil. They knew the silence was not proof of absence, but a reflection of their own limitations. Drake had listened to one channel. Modern SETI was preparing to listen to billions at once. The challenge was no longer just about building a bigger ear, it was about building a smarter brain. The sheer volume of data cascading from today's radio telescope arrays is a torrent, a digital tsunami of cosmic noise. Searching for a single faint artificial signal within this cacophony is a task far beyond human capability. It is the ultimate needle in a haystack problem, except the haystack is the size of the known universe, and the needle may not even exist. This is where the new generation of searchers made their mark. They are not just astronomers, but masters of information theory, architects of artificial intelligence. At the helm of the newly christened Tesseract Array, in the high arid plains of Chile, you find people like Dr. Aris Thorne. A veteran of the search for 40 years, Thorne is a man carved from patience and skepticism. He remembers the false alarms of the 90s, the satellite interference that sent champagne corks flying prematurely. He is the institutional memory, the keeper of the long silence, his optimism tempered by a lifetime of methodical disappointment. To him, every potential signal is guilty of being terrestrial until proven innocent. He has seen too many ghosts to be easily swayed by a flicker in the data. He represents the unwavering discipline that SETI was forced to learn in the long quiet years after the WOW signal faded into myth. Working alongside him, representing the new vanguard, is Dr. Lena Petrova. A prodigy in computational astrophysics, she designed the array's neural network, an AI she nicknamed Chorus. Chorus doesn't just listen, it learns. It sifts through petabytes of data every hour, filtering out the known signatures of pulsars, quasars, and magnetars. It identifies and discards the cacophony of human technology, the faint chatter of our own satellites, the distant echoes of terrestrial radar, the digital noise bleeding from our interconnected world. Petrova's creation is designed to find the anomaly within the anomaly, the pattern that nature in all its beautiful chaos should not be able to produce. She respects the silence, but does not fear it. To her, it is not an emptiness, but a sea of information waiting for the right key to unlock it. The generational tension between Thorne's cautious experience and Petrova's data-driven faith forms the very heart of the modern search. It was on the 347th day of the Tesseract Array's Deep Sky survey, during what the team called the graveyard shift, that the silence was finally broken. No alarms blared, no lights flashed. The moment of contact, when it came, was a whisper, just as Drake had imagined. It appeared as a single flagged data point on Petrova's monitor, generated by a subroutine in Chorus, designed to detect extreme spectral confinement, an anomaly, just one among dozens that the system flagged every night. Thorne, sipping stale coffee from a ceramic mug, glanced at it from across the control room. His first instinct, honed by 4 decades of false positives, was dismissal. Chorus is probably chasing a reflection off some new military bird, he mumbled, not even looking up completely. Run the standard RFI diagnostic. Terrestrial radio frequency interference, or RFI, was the eternal enemy, the constant barrage of noise from our own civilization that masqueraded as alien whispers. Petrova, however, saw something different. She ran the diagnostic, but her eyes remained fixed on the signal's profile. It was impossibly clean. Most RFI is messy, bleeding across multiple frequencies. This was a razor's edge, a sliver of energy less than 1 hertz wide. Eris, she said, her voice quiet but firm. The side lobes are clean. There's no spectral bleed. Chorus has already cross-referenced it against every known satellite and flight path registry. There's nothing there. Thorne sighed, the weary sigh of a man who had been down this road 1,000 times. He walked over, peering at her screen, his skepticism a palpable force field. He saw the signal, a stark vertical spike on the waterfall display, a pure note held against a universe of static. He saw its coordinates pointing toward a G-type main sequence star in the constellation of Ophiuchus, a sun much like our own, some 75 light-years away, a stone's throw in cosmic terms. It's a beautiful artifact, I'll give you that, he conceded. Let's see if it's still there in the morning. But it was. When the Earth's rotation brought the star system designated TYC 422-96-1 back into the Tesseract's view 23 hours and 56 minutes later, the signal returned. Exactly where it was supposed to be. Exactly as it had been. That was the first true crack in Thorne's armour of disbelief. A fleeting piece of interference is one thing. A signal that reappears with the clockwork precision of a planet's rotation is something else entirely. Panic was not an option. The protocol was ironclad, a step-by-step process designed to eliminate every other possibility before one could even whisper the word alien. The first step was to confirm it wasn't a flaw in their own instrument. They performed a nod, moving the massive dishes of the array a fraction of a degree away from the target star. The signal vanished. They moved it back. The signal reappeared clear and sharp. The verification gauntlet had begun. Thorne initiated a global cascade of secure alerts to partner observatories. In Australia, the Parkes dish, a grand old dame of radio astronomy, slewed its focus to the same coordinates. In China, the colossal 500-metre FAST telescope, the largest single dish on Earth, was roused to listen. The request was discreet, cloaked in technical jargon, asking for collaborative observation of a novel astrophysical phenomenon. No one used the E word, not yet. The tension in the control room in Chile became a living thing. Days blurred into a sleepless haze of data analysis and cross-correlation. The team worked in hushed, reverent tones, acutely aware that they might be standing on the precipice of the single greatest discovery in human history. Or more likely on the verge of another spectacular soul-crushing disappointment. Every new piece of data was a turn of a card in a game with unimaginable stakes. Then came the second revelation, the one that made the hair on Aris Thorne's arm stand on end. Petrova, analysing the signal's structure, discovered it wasn't just a single continuous tone, it was pulsing. It appeared for exactly 1.616 seconds, followed by a period of silence lasting 3.141 seconds, a repeating pattern. But the numbers, they were instantly chillingly familiar. Phi the golden ratio and pi the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. Two of the most fundamental mathematical constants in the universe, encoded into a simple repeating rhythm. Nature could produce pulses, the universe is full of them. Pulses beat with the regularity of a celestial clock. But they don't broadcast in transcendental numbers. This was not the rhythm of physics, this was the rhythm of mathematics, of intention, of mind. The third and perhaps final piece of the puzzle came from the signal's own movement. Over days of observation, they detected a minuscule Doppler shift. The frequency of the signal was subtly rising and falling in a gentle, predictable sine wave. It was the signature of a source in orbit moving toward them and then away from them as it swung around its parent star. They could even calculate the orbital period, roughly 240 Earth days. The signal was not coming from a fixed point in deep space. It was coming from a planet orbiting a sun-like star in a stable, predictable path. A planet in the habitable zone where liquid water could potentially exist. A world. Another world. The teams in Australia and China confirmed everything. They saw it. The same narrow band signal, the same impossibly precise pulse, the same orbital Doppler shift. It was real. It was persistent. and it was unequivocally not ours. In the sterile blue-white light of the Tesseract control room, thousands of miles up in the thin, cold air of the Andes, the verification checklist was finally complete. Every natural explanation had been exhausted. Every possibility of equipment malfunction or terrestrial interference had been systematically, ruthlessly eliminated. There was nowhere else to look. The ghost had been cornered. Dr. Petrova removed her glasses, rubbing her eyes as if waking from a long dream. She turned to Thorn, her face pale, a mixture of terror and awe in her expression. Thorn himself stood motionless, staring at the waterfall display at the thin, unwavering line of light that had travelled for 75 years across the interstellar dark. He had spent his entire life listening to the great silence, preparing himself for it, accepting it. He had trained himself to see phantoms in every flicker of data to guard the gates against false hope. But this was no phantom. This was a voice, deliberate, intelligent, patient. He looked at Petrova, and for the first time in 40 years the hardened skeptic was gone, replaced by the wide-eyed wonder of a boy looking at the stars for the very first time. The silence had not been an answer. It had simply been the space between words. He opened his mouth to speak his voice, a dry rasp, barely audible above the quiet hum of the servers that were now recording the most important message ever received. "My God, Lena," he whispered. I think somebody is saying hello." It began not with an official announcement, but with a whisper. A tremor in the digital world, a leaked data plot shared on an obscure astrophysics forum, a cryptic message from a disgruntled intern. At first it was dismissed as noise, a prank, another false alarm in the long, lonely vigil for extraterrestrial intelligence. But this whisper refused to die. It replicated, jumping from university servers to social media, a single spark that ignited a global firestorm of speculation. Within 48 hours, the secret was outblasted across every screen on the planet. Humanity, a species that had spent its entire existence shouting into an apparently empty cosmos, was suddenly confronted with the terrifying, electrifying possibility of an echo. The world convulsed. For the first time in history, every human being shared a single unifying question. In the neon-drenched canyons of Tokyo, crowds stood mesmerized before giant public screens, the arcane charts and graphs from the observatory, becoming a new kind of public art. In the dusty villages of the Sahel, families huddled around battery-powered radios, listening as translators struggled to convey the magnitude of the news. There was jubilation, a spontaneous worldwide celebration of a cosmic milestone we had only ever dreamed of. But a darker current ran alongside it, a primal fear, a resurfacing of our oldest anxieties about the unknown that lurks in the dark. Leaders gave hurried, uncertain speeches, their carefully prepared words feeling hollow and inadequate. Markets shuddered not with panic, but with a profound uncertainty, as if the fundamental rules of existence had just been rewritten. We had spent millennia defining ourselves by our solitude. Who were we now, while the world reeled, the scientific community closed ranks, turning inward to begin the most rigorous interrogation in the history of knowledge? The unwritten law of the field, Carl Sagan's now sacred mantra, echoed in every laboratory and control room. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The initial detection, as profound as it was just a single voice. To be believed, it needed a chorus. The signal was now on trial, and the jury was composed of every major radio observatory on Earth. The burden of proof was absolute. Every other possibility, no matter how remote, had to be eliminated. It had to be proven innocent of being natural. The first call for corroboration went to the Carl G. Jansky Very Large Array in New Mexico. There, on a high desert plateau, 27 colossal antennas each, a steel giant weighing over 200 tons broke from their observations. Like a herd of mechanical beasts awakening to a strange new scent on the wind, they slowly, gracefully slewed across the sky. Their target, the tiny, unremarkable patch of space between the constellations Lyra and Cygnus, the signal's apparent point of origin. For hours they drank in the faint radio light from that direction, their receivers chilled to temperatures colder than deep space to minimize their own electronic noise. data raw and unfiltered poured into the supercomputers at the Array Operations Center, a torrent of numbers representing the faintest whispers of the universe. Inside the atmosphere was electric, with a tension so thick it felt physical. Every scientist in that room knew they were standing on a historical precipice. They were not merely checking another team's math. They were placing a hand on the pulse of the cosmos, feeling for a heartbeat that shouldn't be there. The computer models began their work cross-correlating the signals from each of the 27 dishes, a process that transforms the array into a single, continent-sized telescope of breathtaking sensitivity. They filtered for everything known to humanity. They subtracted the faint hiss of the cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of the Big Bang. They stripped away the radio emissions from our own galaxy's hydrogen clouds. They meticulously identified and removed the fleeting signatures of every known satellite and the distant chatter of deep space probes. They were hunting for a ghost, and they had to first banish every other spirit in the house. Then it appeared, a single razor-thin spike on their spectral graphs emerging from the background noise like a lighthouse beam cutting through a dense fog. It was there, precisely at force 240575 MHz, exactly where the initial team said it would be. A wave of hushed awe swept through the control room. It was one thing to see a leaked graph on a screen. It was another entirely to see it manifest in your own instruments, to know that your own antennas were at that very moment receiving a focused beam of energy from an interstellar source. It was real. The ghost had a voice. The confirmation a stark 3-sentence-long email was dispatched into the secure network connecting the world's observatories. The first juror had returned its verdict guilty of being extraordinary. The second verdict came from halfway around the world, from the mist-shrouded mountains of Guizhou, China. Here, nestled in a massive limestone crater, lies the 500-meter Aperture Spherical Telescope, or FAST. It is the largest single-dish radio telescope on Earth, a listening ear of staggering proportions capable of detecting a whisper from the edge of the observable universe. When the coordinates arrived, the colossal instrument began its own deliberate dance. Thousands of actuators beneath its reflective surface shifted with microscopic precision, subtly changing the dish's parabolic shape, focusing its immense collecting area onto that same patch of anonymous sky. The team at FAST, a new generation of radio astronomers, worked with a quiet, intense focus. They knew the world's gaze was now turning to them. If the VLA was the confirmation, FAST would be the authenticator. Its sensitivity was so profound that it saw the signal with even greater clarity. The data that flooded their systems painted a portrait of the phenomenon in stunning high definition. They confirmed not just its existence and frequency, but its characteristics with a precision that sent fresh shockwaves through the astronomical community. They measured the signal's bandwidth, the space it occupied on the radio dial, and found it to be impossibly narrow, just a few hertz wide. Natural cosmic sources like the chaotic tantrum of a quasar or the broad sighing emissions of a nebula shout their energy across a vast swathe of the spectrum. They are like floodlights, messy and diffuse. This signal was different. It was a laser, a single, pure, crystalline note in the overwhelming static of the cosmos. Such a tightly controlled monochromic signal has no known natural analogue. It looked for all the world like the product of technology, and still the process of elimination continued. The next great challenge was to rule out the most insidious and common source of false positives: terrestrial interference. Could this be some new exotic form of military satellite, a complex reflection of a ground-based radar signal bouncing off a piece of space debris? A bizarre atmospheric ducting effect. The call went out to a global network. Observatories in Australia, South Africa, and Chile were tasked with a critical experiment. They would all observe the target coordinates simultaneously with the telescopes in the northern hemisphere. If the signal was from Earth or its immediate orbital environment, its properties, especially its perceived frequency, would change dramatically depending on the observer's location due to the Doppler effect from the planet's rotation. The signal would seem to rise or fall in pitch as an observatory rotated toward or away from it. For 24 agonizing hours, as the Earth spun on its axis, this global consortium of telescopes stared unblinking at the source. They tracked it as it rose above the horizon in China, passed overhead in Europe, and set in the Americas. The data was compiled and compared the results laid bare for the entire community to scrutinise. The conclusion was unambiguous and breathtaking. They all saw the exact same signal, but it was subtly blue-shifted for the observatories turning toward the source and red-shifted for those turning away. This was not the chaotic location-dependent shift of a local signal. This was the precise, predictable, mathematically elegant parallax and Doppler shift of a single point of origin located far beyond our solar system, so distant that the Earth itself was just a moving platform carrying the telescopes. It was nailed to the celestial sphere. It was coming from the stars. With every known natural phenomenon and every possible source of human-made interference now ruled out, the scientific world crossed a threshold. The conversation shifted from if to what. The focus turned from mere detection to deep analysis, to dissecting the anatomy of the signal itself. And what they found inside was more profound than anyone had dared to imagine. The signal was not a continuous tone, it was a pulse. A single sharp burst of energy lasting exactly 3.1 by 59 seconds, followed by a period of perfect engineered silence. And then, after a pause of precisely 7:33 hours, it would repeat. Was not approximately every 7 hours, not roughly. It repeated with a precision that defied belief, a celestial metronome ticking, with the accuracy of an atomic clock. Astronomers know of natural pulses. Pulsars, the rapidly spinning corpses of massive stars, are the universe's most famous lighthouses. They sweep beams of radiation across space with a regularity you can set your watch by. But pulsars have a well-known signature. Their pulses are incredibly brief, lasting milliseconds, not seconds. And more importantly, their rotation rate slows down over cosmic time, an almost imperceptible but measurable decay as they radiate away their energy. This pulse did not decay. Hour after hour, day after day, week after week, it arrived perfectly on schedule, its internal clock unwavering. It was a gravitational gyroscope spinning in the void, untouched by the slowing hand of time. It wasn't natural. But the true revelation, the discovery that tipped the scales from profound anomaly to undeniable message, lay within the pulse itself. As the teams at Fast and Greenbank used their immense sensitivity to zoom in on the 3:14 second burst, they found it was not a simple on signal. The pulse was a vessel, and it was carrying cargo. It was internally modulated, its amplitude and frequency shifting in a complex, non-random pattern. It was information. The initial plot of this internal structure looked like a chaotic squiggle, a meaningless vibration. But as mathematicians and signal processors joined the effort, they began to see order emerging from the chaos. They found nested patterns, layers of complexity embedded one within the other like a set of Russian dolls. The first layer was a simple binary string, a representation of on and off states carried in the wave's polarization. But beneath that, encoded in minute frequency shifts, was another pattern. This one was not binary. It was a sequence of prime numbers 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, and so on, laid out in perfect succession. Mathematics, the one truly universal language, a concept we believe must be true everywhere in the cosmos. It was a greeting card written in the language of reality itself. It was the sender's way of saying, "We are not a cosmic accident. We understand the fundamental nature of the universe, just like you." This was not just a signal. It was a deliberately constructed artifact, a message in a bottle thrown across an ocean of space-time, designed to be found, designed to be understood. For the men and women working on this project, the experience was transformative. The long, sleepless nights in sterile control rooms were filled with a strange mixture of methodical scientific rigor and a deeply personal, almost spiritual sense of awe. They spoke in hushed tones, keenly aware that they were the first human beings to eavesdrop on a conversation that had begun light years away long before any of them were born. They felt the immense, crushing weight of their discovery. This was no longer just data. It was contact. It was a revelation that would forever divide human history into two distinct eras, the time we thought we were alone and the time after. The old comfortable anthropocentric view of the universe with humanity at its centre was shattering. We were not the sole proprietors of intelligence, the lonely miracle in a sterile cosmos. We were perhaps just one voice in a much larger, much older galactic conversation. The evidence was now overwhelming a mountain of data so high and so solid that even the most hardened skeptics were falling silent. The signal was confirmed by every major observatory. It was demonstrably not from Earth. It possessed characteristics and narrow bandwidth, a perfect periodicity, a lack of rotational decay that had no known natural explanation. And most damningly of all, it contained a clear, unambiguous, mathematically intelligent structure. It was a key turning in a lock we never knew existed. The question was no longer, is anybody out there? The question was now, what are they trying to tell us? The first line of a message from another world had been received a single complex pulse that promised a story of unimaginable scope. And as we stood on this new shore staring out at a transformed and suddenly crowded cosmos, we had to face the terrifying and exhilarating challenge of what to do next. The greeting had been sent. How would humanity choose to respond? The signal, once a beacon of universe-altering promise, had become a tyrant. For 83 days it had held the world's finest minds hostage, its monotonous repeating pulse a form of cosmic water torture. The initial explosive euphoria that had ripped through the global scientific community was a fading memory replaced by the grim reality of the grind. It was a lock without a key, a message without a language, a ghost in the machine that refused to give up its secrets. From the high-altitude deserts of Chile to the sprawling radio dishes of China, humanity's greatest ears were pressed against the heavens listening to the same 16-second loop from the direction of a nondescript yellow dwarf star over and over and over. It was the sound of everything and the sound of nothing at all. Inside the SETI Institute's primary analysis hub, the air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and intellectual exhaustion. Whiteboards, once pristine canvases for bold theories, were now chaotic palimpsests of failed algorithms and discarded mathematical models. The pulse arrived with a fidelity that was almost cruel, its waveform so clean, so perfect, it seemed to mock their inability to comprehend it. They had dissected its every property, the polarization, the frequency drift, the infinitesimally small variations in its timing. They found nothing. No obvious encoding, no hidden sub-channel, no clever modulation that would betray a complex payload. It was for all intents and purposes a perfect, unwavering and maddeningly simple metronome ticking away across 32 light-years of unforgiving vacuum. To break the deadlock, the data was unleashed. In an unprecedented move, the raw signal data petabytes of it, a digital ocean of numbers was released to the public. Project Chimera, as it was codenamed, harnessed a global network of millions of home computers, a distributed supercomputer the size of a planet. It was a desperate, beautiful gamble, a message in a bottle thrown back into the sea of humanity itself. You sitting at your desk could be the one. Your laptop while you slept could be the processor that stumbled upon the Rosetta Stone. The search was no longer confined to the hallowed halls of academia. It was now a planetary obsession, a collective quest whispered about in every language on Earth. The signal was a shared puzzle, a shared burden, and a shared flickering hope. And it was there in the quiet hum of a university server in Helsinki, running a boutique algorithm written by a postdoctoral astrophysics student named Anya Sharma, that the first thread was pulled. Her program wasn't looking for complex information in the signal's amplitude or frequency, the places everyone else was frantically digging. Instead, it was designed to analyze the one thing that seemed utterly random, the microscopic picosecond level variations in the arrival time of each repeating pulse. To everyone else, these were just statistical noise, the inevitable jitter of a signal that had travelled for more than 3 decades through the turbulent interstellar medium. The consensus was that any real message would be robustly encoded to survive the journey, not hidden in the fragile timing. Anya's algorithm thought differently. It treated the signal not as a radio wave, but as a drum beat. It ignored the sound of the drum and focused only on the rhythm, the silence between the beats. For weeks, her program sifted through the noise, correlating trillions of data points, searching for a pattern in the chaos, a faint melody beneath the roar of a waterfall. Her colleagues had called the approach a romantic longshot. The universe, they argued, was just too noisy for such a delicate mechanism to carry a message. but she persisted, driven by a conviction that intelligence wouldn't necessarily shout. It might whisper. It might hide its greatest secrets in the most unassuming of places. Then, on a Tuesday morning, the system flagged an anomaly. It wasn't a klaxon or a flashing red light. It was a single line of text in a log file, an improbability score that had crossed a 7 sigma threshold. It was the statistical equivalent of a single snowflake surviving a journey through the sun. Something in the temporal jitter was not random. Buried deep within the noise, hidden in the silences between the pulses, was a ghost of a pattern, a rhythm. When Anya first plotted the data, it looked like nothing, just a scattergraph of meaningless points. But when she transformed it, when she viewed the intervals not as a simple timeline but as a sequence, a strange and startling order began to emerge from the static. The pulse would arrive, then there would be a pause, then another pulse. The interval between the first and second pulse was on average 2 units of a fundamental timescale they had yet to decipher. The interval between the second and third pulse was 3 units, between the third and fourth 5 units, then 7, then 11, then 13. The numbers scrolled across her screen, a ghostly procession materializing from the background radiation of the cosmos. They were stark, they were unmistakable, they were prime. It was the simplest, most elegant proof of intelligence imaginable. A beacon that didn't just announce, "We are here," but "we think." Prime numbers are a universal concept, a truth of mathematics that would be recognized by any intelligence capable of building a radio transmitter. They are not a product of biology or culture or environment. They are a fundamental feature of the fabric of logic itself. To broadcast them is to extend a hand across the void and say, "We share a common ground. We understand the universe as you do." It was a password, a cosmic handshake. The lock which had resisted the brute force of 1,000 supercomputers had yielded to a key forged from pure mathematics. The news spread through the Chimera network not like a shockwave, but like a rising tide. First, a hushed email from Helsinki to the core team at SETI. Then a frantic encrypted video call. Screens were shared. Data was triple-checked. Other teams, using Anya's initial findings as a guide, independently replicated the result within hours. The rhythm was there. It had been there all along, hidden in plain sight, a secret melody played on a cosmic drum. The world had been listening to the notes, but the true message was in the rests. The silence spoke louder than the signal. This discovery, profound as it was, only deepened the mystery. The prime number sequence was the key, but what door did it unlock? It was a preamble, an introduction. Surely a civilization capable of this feat would not have built a colossal interstellar transmitter just to recite a mathematical textbook. There had to be more. The focus of the global effort shifted instantly. With the prime number sequence as their temporal grid, their metronome, they could now look at the signal in a completely new light. They could use the prime intervals to properly stack the data to align the waveforms of each pulse with a precision that was previously impossible. They were no longer looking at a single repeating message, but at thousands of individual messages laid one on top of the other. Imagine a book where every page is printed directly on top of the last, creating an incomprehensible smudge of ink. The prime number sequence gave them a way to carefully magically separate the pages. Each pulse, they now realized, was a single line of a much larger message. The first pulse in the sequence was line 1. The second pulse, arriving 2 time units later, was line 2. The third, arriving 3 units after that, was line 3, and so on. The signal wasn't a repeating loop, it was a broadcast steganographically encoded within its own rhythm, a message delivered 1 beat at a time. The sheer breathtaking intellect behind such a design was almost too much to comprehend. It was a masterpiece of cosmic engineering. As the newly organized data began to pour in, a new pattern started to form. This one wasn't in the timing, but in the amplitude of the pulses themselves. Each pulse, each line of the message had a slightly different strength. When they converted these strength variations into a binary code, a strong pulse being a 1, a weaker pulse being a 0, they were left with a staggering stream of digital information. It was raw, unadorned data, but it was structured. It was the content of the letter, the ink on the pages they had so painstakingly separated. The world held its breath. The SETI team, hands trembling, began the process of rendering the binary stream. They didn't know what to expect. A string of chemical formulae, a complex mathematical theorem, a linguistic primer. The first section of the code was a simple calibration sequence, a checkerboard pattern that allowed them to perfectly align the data grid. It was an instruction manual for reading the rest of the message. And then line by line, pixel by pixel, an image began to resolve on their screens. It was not a high-resolution photograph. It was a simple abstract wireframe, a schematic drawn with the ones and zeros of the cosmos. First, a single point appeared in the center, then a circle around it, an orbit, then another circle further out, then a third and a fourth. They were watching the slow, deliberate construction of a planetary system. Their planetary system. There were gas giants identifiable by their relative size and distance from the central star. There were smaller, rocky inner worlds, and on the third planet from the star, a world that appeared to be in the habitable zone, a small arrow pointed an unambiguous marker screaming, "This is us." It was a map, a treasure map with an X marking the spot not of buried gold, but of an entire civilization. But it didn't stop there. As more of the binary message was decoded, a second, smaller diagram began to form alongside the first. This one was not astronomical. It was biological. It depicted a complex double-stranded helix, a shape hauntingly familiar to every biologist on Earth. Yet, it was different. It was a triple helix. A molecule of heredity, but one built on a foundation alien to our own. It was a portrait of their life, not their faces or their bodies, but the very code that built them the engine of their evolution. The message was as clear as it was terrifyingly profound. This is our home, and this is what we are made of. In the control room at the Allen Telescope Array, there was no celebration. No one cheered. No champagne bottles were uncorked. There was only a deep, profound, and soul-shattering silence. The men and women who had dedicated their lives to this search simply stared at their screens, their faces illuminated by the ghostly glow of a message from another world. They were the first of our species to truly know, to know without a shred of doubt that the staggering loneliness of the human condition was finally over. The silence in the room was the sound of history breaking in two, the sound of a world that would never be the same again. It was the sound of 2 billion years of terrestrial evolution suddenly being put on notice. The weight of their discovery felt like a physical pressure crushing the air from their lungs. They were no longer just scientists. They were gatekeepers to the single greatest secret humanity had ever uncovered. The image on the screen was more than just data. It was a revelation that would unmoor us from everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. It would shatter religions, reshape philosophies, and redefine the very meaning of being human. The question that had driven them for decades, "Are we alone?" had been answered with a resounding, irrefutable no. And in its place, a new set of questions far more daunting descended upon them. Who were they? What did they want? What happens when you learn that you are not the only life in the cosmos, and perhaps not even the most advanced? The signal from the heavens had not stopped. The prime numbers kept coming. The diagrams of their world and their biology continued to be drawn pixel by pixel across the void. The message was still arriving. But for the small group of humans who now knew its contents, the age of detection was over. The age of contact with all its terrifying and wondrous possibilities had just begun. The burden of that knowledge was immense, and their next decision what to tell the world and how would be the most important choice anyone had ever had to make. The universe was speaking to us, and the time had come to figure out what we were going to say in reply. The global chorus of celebration, however, could not last. Like the brief, brilliant flash of a supernova, the initial euphoria that united our world in a singular moment of wonder began to dissipate its light, giving way to the long, complex shadows that reality always casts. The message from the stars, once a symbol of cosmic brotherhood, was rapidly becoming a mirror reflecting not the heavens, but the deep, troubled and fractured nature of humanity itself. The first cracks in our fragile unity appeared not in laboratories or observatories, but in the hallowed, guarded halls of power. The question at first whispered in secure briefing rooms, and then debated fiercely in emergency sessions of the United Nations, was deceptively simple. Who owned the signal? Was it the property of the nation whose radio telescope, a marvel of engineering perched on a remote mountaintop, had first caught this celestial whisper? Did it belong to the international consortium of universities and private donors whose funding had kept that very telescope operational for decades, scanning the silent void with unwavering hope? Or, as idealists passionately argued, was this a message for everyone, a cosmic inheritance bequeathed to the entire human species, indivisible and transcendent of our terrestrial borders? This was no abstract legal debate. It was a prelude to the most consequential decision in the history of civilization, because the owner of the signal would by default become the custodian of the response to the designated voice for planet Earth. Imagine the geopolitical chessboard, its pieces meticulously arranged through centuries of war diplomacy and economic rivalry, suddenly having a new infinitely powerful piece placed upon it. Nations that had spent decades vying for technological supremacy, for control over resources and information, now saw the signal as the ultimate strategic asset. To control the dialogue with an extraterrestrial intelligence was to hold a key that could unlock unimaginable advancements in energy, physics, biology, perhaps even philosophy. It was a prize so great that the old rules of engagement seemed dangerously obsolete. Secret communiques flashed between world capitals. Military satellites were repositioned not for terrestrial threats, but to scrutinize the orbital paths and communication arrays of geopolitical rivals, searching for any hint of a unilateral effort, a rogue reply, sent without global consensus. The United Nations became a theatre of high-minded rhetoric and clandestine high-stakes negotiation. Publicly, leaders spoke of unity, of a shared destiny of representing humanity with a single harmonious voice. Privately, they manoeuvred for control, forming tenuous alliances, leveraging economic dependencies and asserting historical claims. The International Telecommunication Union, an agency once concerned with radio frequencies and satellite orbits, was suddenly tasked with drafting protocols for interstellar communication, a responsibility so monumental it buckled under the political pressure. Every proposed clause, every line of a potential charter became a battleground for national interest. The dream of a unified Team Earth was dissolving into a far more familiar pattern, a scramble for power driven by the deep-seated fear that if you don't control the future, someone else will. The very existence of the signal, meant to expand our horizons, was instead forcing us to confront the prisons of our own making. While governments drew lines in the sand, a different kind of tremor, a profound theological earthquake was shaking the very foundations of human faith. For millennia, our great religions have provided answers to the ultimate questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? Are we alone? Now, one of those questions had been answered with an emphatic, undeniable no. And in that single cosmic affirmation, the scaffolding of countless belief systems began to groan under an unbearable new weight. In Vatican City, theologians and astrophysicists convened in conferences that ran day and night, grappling with the implications. If life intelligent and sophisticated existed elsewhere, what did that mean for the unique central role of humanity in the divine narrative? Was the story of creation of salvation a uniquely terrestrial event, or was it a drama enacted on 1 billion worlds across the galaxy? Some saw the signal as a glorious confirmation of a creator whose work was infinitely more vast and creative than ever imagined. They preached that this was a call from our cosmic brethren, a testament to the boundless nature of a divine spark. It was not a challenge to faith, they argued, but its ultimate expansion. But for others, this celestial message was a source of deep crisis. If humanity was not the singular cherished focus of creation, did that diminish our purpose? Did it render sacred texts written in a world that believed itself to be the centre of all things as parochial as tragically limited in their scope? Across the globe, this schism echoed through every faith. Imams in Cairo debated interpretations of the Quran in light of this new knowledge, some seeing it as proof of Allah's infinite power, others wrestling with verses that seemed to place humanity in a special unrivaled position. Rabbis in Jerusalem explored the Talmud for precedents for any philosophical framework that could accommodate this reality, without shattering a covenant forged thousands of years ago. Buddhist masters in the Himalayas spoke of the endless cycle of existence, suggesting that consciousness could arise in any form on any world, and that the signal was merely a reminder of the universe's infinite interconnected nature. Yet for millions of the devout, the comfort of certainty was gone, replaced by a dizzying existential vertigo. The tidy human-centric cosmos that had given their lives meaning had been irrevocably shattered. They were now just one voice in a potentially infinite cosmic choir, and they had no idea if their part in the song had any special significance at all. Beyond faith in the halls of academia and the forums of public debate, the signal ignited a philosophical firestorm, forcing a radical re-examination of our most fundamental concepts. For centuries we have debated the nature of life and consciousness, but always with a sample size of one Earth. All our definitions, all our biological and neurological models were based on the carbon-based, water-dependent DNA-driven life that emerged on this planet. Now we had irrefutable proof of intelligence that was by its very nature alien. This wasn't just another species to classify, it was another genesis. The questions became staggering in their implications. What is a life form? The signal's intricate layered mathematics demonstrated a mind, a capacity for logic and abstraction far beyond our own. But did that mind belong to a biological creature? Could it be a crystalline entity living on geological timescales? Perhaps it was a machine intelligence, an ancient network of pure information that had long outlived its organic creators. Could consciousness exist as a distributed planetary phenomenon? A global brain communicating as a single entity? Every assumption we held about the prerequisites for thought brains, neurons, even a physical body was now on the table, subject to profound and unsettling doubt. The very definition of I and we was being challenged from 34 light-years away. If an intelligence could exist without a body as we know it, without the same drives for survival, reproduction, and legacy, then its psychology, its motivations would be utterly terrifyingly incomprehensible. We were no longer just looking for a who, but for a what. And the terrifying possibility began to dawn that we might be so fundamentally different that true understanding, a genuine meeting of minds, was an impossibility. We could be like an ant trying to comprehend the internet, aware that a vast complex system of information exists, but utterly lacking the conceptual framework to grasp its meaning or intent. This philosophical uncertainty bled into the geopolitical and theological debates, compounding the confusion and fear. How can you draft a reply when you don't know the nature of the being you're addressing? How can you pray when you don't know if the concept of a soul is a universal constant or a bizarre localized quirk of terrestrial biology? And it was from this fertile ground of division, doubt and dread that a chilling new idea began to take root in the collective human psyche. It was an old concept, a fringe theory whispered among a handful of astronomers and science fiction authors, but now it exploded into the mainstream with the force of a terrifying prophecy. It is known as the dark forest theory. The theory proposes a grim solution to the Fermi Paradox, the question of why, in a universe so vast we have never seen any evidence of other civilizations. The answer it suggests is that the universe is a dark forest filled with silent hidden hunters. In this forest, every civilization is a potential threat, because you can never know the true intentions of another intelligent species, and because the distances between stars create insurmountable delays in communication, the safest course of action is always to remain silent. To reveal your location is to light a torch in the darkness, inviting predators who may be far older, far more powerful and far less benevolent than you. The first law of this cosmic wilderness is survival, and survival means eliminating any potential future threat before it can eliminate you. The silence of the universe. The theory argues is not because it is empty. It is because the survivors have learned to hold their breath and stay hidden. Suddenly our own history looked different. Our century of leaking radio waves, our television broadcasts, our radar signals, they were no longer innocent byproducts of our technological growth. They were screams in the dark, a reckless announcement of our existence to a cosmos we did not understand. The CT signal itself was cast in a terrifying new light. Was it a genuine, friendly greeting, or was it something far more sinister? Perhaps it was a lure, a baited hook cast into the cosmic ocean to see what might bite. Maybe it was a test, a filter, designed to identify emerging civilizations that were naive enough to answer. The mathematical elegance, the embedded prime numbers, the layered complexity, were these a generous gift of knowledge, Or were they a demonstration of superiority, a subtle warning shot from a civilization that could think on a level we could barely begin to comprehend? The dark forest theory spread like a virus through the global information network. It became the subject of panicked news reports, viral videos and heated parliamentary debates. A powerful new faction emerged in the global discourse, the non-responders. They argued with desperate urgency that sending a reply, any reply, was an act of planetary suicide. Silence, they insisted, was our only shield. We should turn off our transmitters, listen quietly, and pray that whoever or whatever was out there had not yet pinpointed our exact location. Their arguments were persuasive because they preyed on our deepest, most primal fears. Fear of the unknown, fear of our own vulnerability in the face of the immense, and the historical certainty that every time a more technologically advanced civilization has encountered a less advanced one on Earth, the results have been catastrophic for the latter. Why, they asked, should we expect the rules of the cosmos to be any different? This new paranoia froze the already stalled global negotiations. The question was no longer simply, who should speak for Earth, but the far more terrifying question of should Earth speak at all? Expert panels became hopelessly divided. One group of scientists, led by the optimistic pioneers of CETI, argued that the signal's very structure, its patient repetition, its mathematical clarity was inherently peaceful, an invitation to a galactic community. To hide in fear, they claimed, would be to squander the single greatest moment in the history of life on this planet, a chance to transcend our limitations and join a conversation that may have been going on for eons. Another group composed of military strategists, risk analysts, and evolutionary biologists pointed to the unyielding logic of self-preservation. They argued that projecting our own human values of altruism and curiosity onto a truly alien intelligence was a fatal anthropocentric mistake. The stakes were not scientific prestige or philosophical enlightenment. They were the survival of every living thing on our world. In the face of existential risk, they concluded the only responsible action was inaction. And so we found ourselves adrift, caught between two impossible poles. On one side, the breathtaking promise of contact, of new knowledge, of an end to our cosmic solitude. On the other, the paralyzing fear of annihilation of a threat so absolute it could extinguish consciousness on Earth in the blink of a cosmic eye. The signal, that steady rhythmic pulse from the void, continued its patient arrival, utterly indifferent to the chaos it had unleashed. It was a constant ticking clock reminding us that the universe would not wait for us to solve our internal squabbles or overcome our fears. Humanity, having reached for the stars, now found itself staring into an abyss both in the heavens and within ourselves. We were a species on trial, judged not by some alien tribunal, but by our own capacity for wisdom, for unity, and for courage. The greatest discovery in our history had become our greatest crisis, forcing a terrible civilization, defining choice upon us. The message had been received, but the true test, the question of who we really are, was just beginning. What would we do now? The message from the void had ended, but its echo had just begun. It was no longer a question of physics or astronomy, but of philosophy, of sociology, of our very soul. For the first time in our history, humanity found itself holding a cosmic mirror, and the reflection staring back was fractured, terrified, and magnificent. The question, whispered first in sterile control rooms, and then shouted in the halls of power, was no longer what it was, but who we would be in response. Should we answer? Could we dare to break the great galactic silence, to cast our own fragile voice into that impossibly vast and unknown ocean? The planet, once a collection of nations, had become a single, global council locked in the most profound debate it had ever known. Two great philosophies began to crystallize, pulling at the fabric of our collective consciousness. They were not divided by borders or languages, but by a far more fundamental schism: hope versus fear. Those who argued for a reply, the speakers saw this as the moment we were born for. They saw it as the ultimate fulfillment of our exploratory impulse, the very drive that pushed our ancestors out of Africa, across the oceans, and finally off the surface of our world. To remain silent, they argued, was a betrayal of our nature, an act of cosmic cowardice. It was to see the hand of God or the universe or whatever name you gave the sublime reaching out from the darkness, and to turn away to shutter the windows and pretend we were not home. They spoke of a sacred duty not just to ourselves but to the senders. What kind of civilization hears a call for connection across light years of desolation, and offers only the cold insult of silence? It was in their view an abdication of our intelligence, a failure of the spirit. In Geneva, in Tokyo, in Washington, they convened symposia of breathtaking scope. Philosophers debated alongside quantum physicists, linguists worked with theologians, artists sketched concepts for a message that could convey the totality of the human experience. How could we possibly distill our essence into a single transmission, a beam of light that would carry the weight of our entire existence? Do we send the crystalline perfection of Bach's fugues, a testament to our capacity for transcendent beauty? Do we transmit the elegant proofs of our mathematics, the Pythagorean theorem, and the value of pi, hoping to find common ground in the universal language of logic? This was the path of the Voyager Golden Record, a beautiful, hopeful postcard from a younger, more naive humanity. But now the stakes were infinitely higher. This wasn't a shot in the dark, it was a direct reply. They knew where we were roughly. We knew precisely where they were. The debates over content became a painful exercise in self-examination. Should our message be an idealized portrait, a carefully curated highlight reel of our species, a presentation of our science, our art, our moments of grace? Or would that be a profound lie, a lie of omission that could prove disastrous? Some argued with fierce conviction that we must send it all. The good and the evil, the beautiful and the grotesque. We should transmit the structure of our DNA, but also the history of our plagues. We should send the poetry of Shakespeare, but also the audio records of our wars, the mushroom cloud rising over Hiroshima, the cries from our genocides. To send anything less, they claimed, would be to present a dangerously incomplete picture. Honesty, raw and brutal, was the only ethical path. For if they were to know us, they must know our darkness as well as our light. Perhaps our capacity for self-destruction was just as important a data point as our capacity for love. This faction believed our flaws were not a source of shame, but a part of our story, the very struggle that defines our consciousness. They envisioned a message that confessed our tribalism, our irrationality, our troubling propensity for violence, but framed it as a species in transition. A message that said, we are young, we are flawed, we're still learning, but we're trying. It was a plea for understanding and admission of vulnerability that they believed was the truest sign of an advanced intelligence. The creation of this potential message became a work of art in itself, a Rosetta Stone for a soul. Teams laboured to create a multi-layered codex, beginning with fundamental physics and chemistry building to biology, then to the complexities of our thought, our societies, our dreams and our nightmares. It was humanity's grand, flawed and heartbreaking autobiography, prepared for an audience of unknown stars. Yet for every voice that clamoured to speak, another rose to plead for silence. These were the listeners. They were not cowards, nor were they pessimists. They called themselves realists, guardians of a fragile, precious candle in an infinite darkness. Their arguments were not born of misanthropy, but of a deep protective love for humanity and all life on Earth. They urged us to consider the terrifying possibilities that history, both our own and the stark logic of evolution, presented. On Earth, every instance of a technologically advanced civilization encountering a less advanced one has been catastrophic for the latter. Why, they asked, would the rules of the cosmos be any different? The universe, for all its beauty, has been shaped by competition and survival. To naively assume that a more advanced intelligence must also be a benevolent one was in their eyes a potentially fatal gamble of breathtaking arrogance. They pointed to the silence itself as evidence. The great silence, the Fermi Paradox, the unnerving quiet of a galaxy that should be teeming with voices. Why was it so quiet out there? The listeners offered a chilling explanation, a hypothesis that spread like a ghost story around the digital campfires of the internet and the hushed halls of academia. Perhaps the galaxy isn't empty. Perhaps it's a dark forest filled with silent hunters. In this forest, every civilization is a hidden predator, and the cardinal rule is to never ever reveal your position. To make a sound, to light a fire, is to invite annihilation from something older, more powerful, and utterly indifferent to your existence. The first one to speak is the first to die. In this terrifyingly logical framework, the signal from Proxima Centauri wasn't an invitation. It could be the dying scream of a civilization that had just broken the rule, or even worse, it could be bait. This argument was not easily dismissed. It tapped into our deepest, most primal fears. The listeners painted a vivid, horrifying picture, our hopeful, art-filled message slicing through the void, a beacon of our existence, our location, our technological level, our biology, a dinner bell ringing in the darkness. They argued that our only responsible course of action was to listen, to learn, to gather every photon of data from their system to study them for centuries if need be from the safety of our silence. The signal proved that technology for interstellar communication existed. If they were there, others might be too. Our first priority was not contact, it was survival. Let them not know we are here, they urged. Let us watch from the shadows, an undiscovered tribe observing the gods, until we understand the rules of this cosmic jungle. To do anything else was to risk the future of every human being yet to be born for the sake of satisfying our own generation's curiosity. The world population found itself torn apart by this fundamental choice. The debate was no longer confined to sterile meeting rooms. It was the only topic of conversation from global news networks to family dinner tables. You could see the division in the faces of people on the street. In one person's eyes, the gleam of transcendent hope, the dream of a shared destiny among the stars. In another's, the shadow of profound existential dread. It was a choice between two visions of maturity. Was true maturity the courage to reach out, to connect, to be vulnerable? Or was it the wisdom to be cautious, the discipline to observe the quiet strength of restraint? Humanity had become a single mind at war with itself, a global psyche wrestling with its own identity. We were simultaneously the eager child wanting to say hello, and the wary adult who knows the universe is not a fairy tale. As the days turned into weeks, the pressure mounted. The optimal transmission window to Proxima Centauri, a period when the alignment of the planets and the orientation of our most powerful transmitters were perfect, was approaching. A decision had to be made. A special consortium formed under the banner of the United Nations, but operating with unprecedented global authority, was convened. It was composed not just of heads of state, but of the world's leading scientists, ethicists, historians, and cultural leaders. They were sealed in a chamber, a theatre for the final act of humanity's soliloquy. For 72 hours they debated, their faces etched with the impossible weight of their charge. Every argument was laid bare, every potential consequence, from a golden age of interstellar cooperation to the instantaneous extinction of our species, was contemplated. The exhaustion was palpable, the air thick with the gravity of 1 billion futures hanging on their consensus. Outside, the world held its breath. Trillions of eyes were fixed on the great radio telescopes poised across the planet from the Atacama Desert to the plateaus of China. They had become more than scientific instruments. They were the potential voice of our world, or the ears of our silent vigil. They were giant steel disciples awaiting a command. Would they turn their gaze outward and speak, converting the carefully crafted message of our existence into a focused beam of coherent energy? A spear of pure information hurled across 4 light-years of nothingness, carrying Bach and Einstein and the sound of a human heartbeat. Or would they remain fixed, listening, their massive dishes upturned to the sky like cupped hands, straining to catch any further whisper from the dark, our own voices held tightly in our chests? The true climax was not some distant alien response. It was here. It was now. It was the agonizing, world-changing moment of a species choosing its own future. Then the doors of the chamber opened. A single figure emerged, their face unreadable, holding a simple sealed communique. The camera zoomed in, the world leaned forward. There was no grand speech, no dramatic pronouncement. Just the quiet, solemn transfer of the decision to the technicians at Global Transmission Control. The order was given. In control rooms across the planet, men and women nodded their hands, moving with practiced, deliberate calm. And in the high, thin air of the Chilean mountains, the first dish of the array began to move. It was a slow, majestic pirouette of metal and machinery, its motion almost impossibly smooth. One by one, in perfect silent synchrony, the others followed. The dishes of the Very Large Array in New Mexico. The 500-meter aperture spherical telescope in Guizhou. A global network, a planetary instrument acting as one. They did not turn to Proxima Centauri. Instead, they shifted their focus just a fraction of a degree to a quiet empty patch of sky far from the ecliptic plane. A region of deep, cold, unremarkable blackness. A protocol was initiated, a sequence that had been designed in the frantic final hours of debate. It was a compromise born of our divided soul, an act that was neither a shout nor a whisper. It was something new. A single incredibly powerful focused pulse of unmodulated carrier waves was prepared. It contained no language, no mathematics, no art, no DNA. It was devoid of information, a pure artificial tone, the electronic equivalent of a single plucked string. It was not aimed at our cosmic neighbours, but away from them, and from everything else. A declaration of presence without a declaration of location. A single, momentary flare of intelligence shot into the deepest, most barren part of the interstellar medium. The generators hummed, drawing on the power of entire cities. A low thrum of energy vibrated through the ground beneath the arrays. For 10 seconds, an unimaginably powerful beam of coherent radio waves, a celestial blowtorch brighter than our sun, in that specific frequency sliced through our ionosphere and escaped into the void. It was an act that said everything and nothing. It said, "We are here." It said, "We are powerful enough to do this." It said, "We are wise enough not to tell you where we are." It was a statement of capability and of restraint. A whisper to the cosmos, but a roar to ourselves. A message not for them, but for us. It was humanity's final, unified answer to the call from the void. We're no longer children shouting in the dark. We are the listeners now. And as the pulse faded, vanishing into the endless night, a new silence fell upon the earth. Not the silence of ignorance that had defined our past, but the profound, watchful and patient silence of our future. And so after the whirlwind of discovery, after the global debates that burned through our screens and our politics, we are left here. Here in the quiet aftermath of the greatest revelation in history, the journey that began with a phantom, a ghost in the machine at the Greenbank telescope, has delivered us to this new and unnerving shore. It was a path carved not by explorers in starships, but by mathematicians and linguists, by astrophysicists and philosophers, all working in unison to translate a whisper from across the void. We have followed them every step of the way. From that first stubbornly repeating sequence of prime numbers, a pattern, too perfect, too deliberate to be the work of nature. We felt the initial tremor of what was to come. You remember that moment, the one where the possibility first settled into your mind, not as science fiction, but as a headline that would soon become the permanent backdrop to human life. We watched as the global scientific community, in an unprecedented act of collaboration, pieced together the signal's nested architecture. They uncovered the universal language of physics encoded within its structure, the fine structure, constant, the spectral line of hydrogen, a chemical periodic table that mirrored our own, yet with tantalizing, exotic additions in its upper limits. It was a Rosetta Stone from the stars, a greeting card that began by establishing a shared understanding of the cosmos itself. The message was not a simple hello. It was a staggering work of art, a cosmic tutorial woven into the very fabric of the transmission. It gave us a glimpse into a biology not born of Earth, a map of a solar system achingly far away, and a poignant, simple depiction of a bipedal form not unlike our own gesturing toward a double helix. They showed us their fundamental building block of life, an act of profound vulnerability and trust. And then the final devastatingly simple payload, a series of tones, a melody. The first piece of alien music ever heard, a composition that obeyed the same physical laws of harmony and acoustics that govern our own, yet was hauntingly beautifully different. Its resonance lingers still, an anthem for a universe suddenly twice as large, twice as mysterious, and infinitely less lonely. This entire saga, from a strange anomaly in a dataset to a complete reordering of our reality, represents more than a scientific achievement. It is a testament to our own relentless curiosity, the innate human drive to look up and ask, is anyone out there? For centuries, that question was a philosophical indulgence, a poet's dream. Now it is a historical fact. The answer we now know is yes, we are not alone. Say the words to yourself, feel their weight. For all of recorded time, humanity has been the sole protagonist in its own story, our triumphs and tragedies playing out on a lonely stage surrounded by a silent sleeping audience of stars. We defined ourselves by our uniqueness, our presumed position as the only thinking beings in a vast unthinking emptiness. This cosmic solitude was a foundational pillar of our religions, our philosophies, our sense of self. It shaped our arrogance and our fears in equal measure. Alien Signal 2025 took a celestial hammer to that pillar, and in its shattering we were all forced to see ourselves anew. The shift was not instantaneous. It was a slow, grinding and often painful recalibration of everything we thought we knew. At first there was euphoria, a global sense of unity, as we all stared up at the same sky, at the same pinpoint of light in the constellation of Cygnus, now imbued with an almost sacred significance. For a fleeting moment, our terrestrial squabbles, our borders and our dogmas seemed laughably small. We were all Terrans, the inhabitants of the third planet, the recipients of a message from the deep. But this newfound unity was fragile. The signal in confirming we were not unique also exposed our deepest insecurities. Old divisions found new battlegrounds. Some saw the senders as saviours, others as a potential threat. Religions fractured with some, embracing the news as proof of a universally creative God, while others decried it as the ultimate blasphemy, a grand deception. New cults sprang up overnight worshipping the Cygnian messengers and poring over every bit and byte of the transmission, as if it were scripture-seeking hidden meanings that our scientists insisted were not there. The signal became a mirror, and in it, we saw not the face of an alien, but the chaotic, brilliant and terrified face of ourselves. It forced us to confront the most difficult questions. If another intelligence exists, are our ethics, our morals, our values merely a local custom? Is the human experience which we held as the universal measure of all things just one isolated data point in a galactic sea of consciousness? This existential vertigo has become the new human condition. We are like children who, having believed they were the centre of their parents' world, walk into a crowded room for the first time and realise they are just one among many. The experience is humbling, terrifying, and ultimately liberating. We have been provincialised, our Earth demoted from the centre stage to just one of many lighted windows in a cosmic city. This change is irreversible. It is now woven into the fabric of our culture, into the minds of our children, who will grow up in a world where alien is not a speculative concept but a known reality. They will inherit a universe that is fundamentally more complex and more wonderful than the one we were born into. They will look at the stars not with a sense of lonely longing, but with the quiet, thrilling knowledge that someone is looking back. And with that knowledge comes an immense and profound responsibility. We are now part of a conversation, even if for now it is a monologue. Our actions are no longer just our own. We represent our world. Our planet, our biosphere, our entire history is now a single collective embassy to the stars. The signal has in a way forced a kind of maturity upon us. We must now consider our long-term future not just for our own sake, but for the sake of our place in this newly revealed galactic community. This is the enduring legacy of 2025, the end of our cosmic isolation, and the beginning of our cosmic identity. And now the great wait begins. After the initial frenzy of decoding and interpretation, we did what our species has always done when faced with a call from afar. We answered. The decision to reply was perhaps the most contentious global debate in human history, a process that took years and involved every nation, every culture. What could we possibly say to encapsulate the entirety of our species? How could we represent our art, our science, our love, our wars, our immense capacity for both creation and destruction? The final message, the Arecibo 2.0, as it's been nicknamed, was a masterpiece of compromise and hope. A curated archive of our greatest scientific knowledge, our most profound artistic achievements, the genetic codes of our planet's diverse life, and a message of peace encoded in the same mathematical language the original signal used to greet us. It was our digital hand extended across the darkness, and when it was sent blasted towards Cygnus by our most powerful transmitters, an unprecedented quiet fell upon the Earth. a quiet filled with the colossal scale of time. The star system of the senders, a G-type main sequence star we now call Savitri, lies nearly 500 light-years away. Our reply travelling at the universe's ultimate speed limit will take 5 centuries to cross that gulf. If a being is there to receive it instantly, and if they choose to reply at once, their answer will take another 5 centuries to return. We have embarked on a conversation where the pause between sentences is 1,000 years, a millennium. Think of what that means. The scientist who crafted and sent our reply will not live to hear the echo, nor will their children, nor their grandchildren, nor their great-grandchildren for 20 generations. We have invested our hope in a future we will never see. We have written a letter to ghosts. This is the long patience, the defining project of the 22nd century and beyond. It is an act of faith on a civilizational scale. We are building cathedrals of time, monuments of listening. Deep space arrays larger and more sensitive than any that came before are being constructed their sole purpose, to watch, to listen, to wait for a single specific frequency from a single specific point in the sky. These observatories are our new sacred sites. Maintaining them, funding them, passing down the knowledge of their operation from one generation to the next has become a profound cultural challenge. It requires a stability and a foresight that our species has rarely demonstrated. We are in effect making a promise to our distant descendants, a promise that we will keep the watchfires burning, that we will not forget. This millennial vigil changes our relationship with time itself. We are forced to think in terms of centuries, not election cycles or quarterly reports. It instills in us a sense of deep time, a perspective, that what we do today will echo for 1,000 years. It is a burden, but it is also a gift. It may be the very thing that helps us navigate the turbulent centuries ahead, a shared noble purpose that helps us look beyond our immediate horizons. The wait is not a passive one. While one half of the effort is a patient vigil, the other is a frantic, unending analysis. The original signal was not a book to be read once and then placed on a shelf. It is a celestial artifact of inexhaustible complexity, and we have only just begun to scratch its surface. Every day, teams of scientists around the world plumb its depths armed with more powerful computers and more sophisticated algorithms. They are the cosmic archaeologists of our time. They examine the carrier wave itself, the seemingly empty river of energy upon which the message was delivered. They search for subtle modulations, tiny fluctuations in its frequency or amplitude, that might encode a second or even a third layer of information. Some believe that the physics of the sender's homeworld, the precise gravitational pull of their star, the wobble of their planet's axis, the atmospheric density are all subtly imprinted onto the signal's very structure. A message within the medium. This field, known as signal forensics, has become one of the most exciting areas of modern science. We are learning as much from how they sent the message as we are from what the message says. The sheer power efficiency of the transmission, for example, hints at a mastery of energy and physics that is far beyond our own. It seems they were able to focus the beam with a precision that should be impossible, defying our understanding of quantum mechanics. Unraveling this one technological mystery alone could revolutionize our own energy and communication systems. The musical portion of the message is also under constant scrutiny. Musicologists and mathematicians work together analysing the relationships between the tones, the scales that are implied, the rhythmic structures. They've discovered intricate fractal patterns within the melody, a self-similarity that suggests a level of compositional complexity that is breathtaking. Is this just their form of art, or is it another data layer? Is it possible that a mathematical proof or a physical law is encoded in the relationships between the notes, a symphony of science? The questions are endless, and for every answer we find a dozen new mysteries bloom. The signal is a gift that keeps on giving a scientific and cultural treasure trove that will likely occupy us for centuries long before any reply could ever reach us. It is the ultimate puzzle box crafted by an intelligence we may never meet, but with whom we now share a profound and intimate connection. So we find ourselves at the dawn of a new human epoch. The detection of the alien signal of 2025 was not an endpoint. It was not the closing of a chapter. It was the explosive page one rewrite of the entire human story. We have been handed a new narrative, a new context for our existence. We're no longer the lonely, solitary thinkers of the cosmos. We are the new kids on a very, very old block. It fills us with a humility we desperately needed, and a sense of wonder we thought we had lost. From this moment on, you will never look at the night sky in the same way again. That blanket of darkness, once a symbol of infinite distance and solitude, is now a veil. Behind it are other minds, other histories, other songs. We are part of a grand, unfolding cosmic story, and we have only just been invited to listen in. The silence we hear now is not empty. It is the silence of anticipation, the silence of a world holding its breath together. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence is over. But the search for what it means to be human in a crowded universe, that has just begun.